Welcome to episode 5 of the Review Crew, IGN's new review show where we bring folks from all over the gaming community to talk about the biggest reviews. This week, it's 1 month with the Xbox Series X. We've invited 3 reviewers on to talk about their thoughts on the first month with Microsoft's new console. I'm your host, Zach Ryan, and this week my crew consists of Ryan McCaffrey, executive editor of previews at IGN, Jason Schreier, reporter at Bloomberg News, and Michael Hyam, editor and host at GameSpot. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this morning to talk about the Xbox Series X. Now, I'm going to start with what is a long-standing tradition on Review Crew, and that is a very clever segment that I call Best and Worst. Best and Worst basically asks our panelists to tell us what is the best part about owning an Xbox Series X right now, and what is the worst part about owning an Xbox Series X. Jason, can we start with you?
I think the best part of owning an Xbox Series X right now is if you happen to have skipped the last 2 generations of Xbox consoles or the last 2 generations of video games, you suddenly have access to this giant, massive back catalog of cool stuff, especially if you get Xbox Game Pass. On top of that, you have this computer sitting in your living room. It's $500, but is way more powerful than most PCs you can get out there. And I say this as an avid PC builder, PC gamer. So that's pretty cool. I think that for the Xbox's other flaws, that is pretty objectively a cool thing. So I think the worst part is this is kind of like rote for Microsoft by now, but the lack of games is just such a bummer. I remember getting a review unit back in mid-October and looking at it, and I got a bunch of codes from Microsoft, and they're all games I'd already played, and I just was looking at it, and I was like, what am I going to do with this thing? Eventually got Yakuza and Assassin's Creed, which was cool, but you can play those on anything, and just the real shortage of games to play, not only now but in the near future. It's looking like 2021 is going to be a pretty weak year for Xbox, and a lot of the acquisitions they've been making over the past few years might not pay off until 2022 and beyond. Halo Infinite was just delayed to fall of next year, so it's going to be a long wait for some like really good first party stuff on there, sadly.
Now, we're certainly going to talk about first-party stuff for Xbox Series X, but I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of the worsts of the best and worst segment will be similar to this sentiment. Let's test this hypothesis by throwing to Michael. What's your best and worst, Michael?
Well, I think Jason's pretty much we share the same sentiments, where you get an Xbox and you get Game Pass, or you get a Series X and you have access to a buffet of games. Like, you load up Game Pass, like,
delicious.
Damn, I have access to all this stuff right here, and you're going to get the best version of those games for the Xbox platform. And I think we'll dig into this a little bit later, but during preview phases, when I was like playing mostly backwards compatible games, like Quick Resume was on point. I had 6 games running. I had 7 games running at one point. And I was just swapping between them, and I was like, yo, this is wild. I can jump between games in a matter of seconds. But as we got more Series X specific games, and they kind of got on with different additions to it, because access to games rolled out during the preview up to the review phase, and then you started to see Quick Resume kind of fall apart a little bit. It's not bad per se, but it is disappointing that it wasn't as seamless as I thought it was. Hopefully that stuff will be worked out, but we'll get into that.
Definitely. We will be talking about Quick Resume a little bit later. Ryan, before we move on to the next topic, I want to get your best and worst as well.
You got it. Well, I'll say on the best side, it's like a PC upgrade in that it's just completely seamless. The setup could not be easier. You can actually use the Xbox app on your phone to really simplify it, like put all your settings in very quickly and easily while the console downloads a firmware update. And then once you're in there, all your entire catalog to the compatibility point that the other guys made, just about everything is there and it works. And all your saves are in the cloud. They just download. You pick right up where you left off on the Xbox One or Xbox One X, whatever you were playing on. So it's just so simple. Like it's really the most the most PC-like console that I've ever seen, and I mean that in a very complimentary way. And then, but on the downside, I guess my heart says games for sure. Jason covered that well, and we're going to talk more about that. So I would say on the worst side is just that this is the most seamless transition to a new generation, but also the least sexy and exciting, honestly, because PlayStation 5 has a new user interface, a new, very upgraded controller that's very different. Like the actual experience of going from a PlayStation 4 to a PlayStation 5 is new and feels new. And for better and for worse, it just doesn't on an Xbox.
I think you're all illustrating a really interesting point, and that's the sort of duality that I've seen around the conversation of the Series X. Right, on the one hand, it definitely feels like an iterative step. Like it is a similar comparison to like the Xbox One to the Xbox One X. This is an upgrade of that sort of concept. But on the other hand, like it is a new console. It is something different. And I think that those two sides are really like the biggest part of the conversation around the Series X right now. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. But before we do that, I'm going to roll it all the way back to 4 short weeks ago when the Xbox Series X arrived in your hot little hands, and you guys did your reviews. So I want each of you to talk a little bit about your reviews, what you felt at the time, how you felt about the Xbox Series X then, and like if you scored it, what score did you give it, and then also how your opinion has changed in the last month. Michael, can we start with you?
Sure. So we're gonna, if talking about my review process, I guess, is that I've been doing a lot of like PC benchmarking through my time at GameSpot. So I kind of took a similar approach with the Series X, because I also think that's probably one of the more, I guess, distinctive features going from previous generation to this generation, at least how it is with the Xbox. I think those were the main focuses of my review, because those are, if you're gonna pay $500 for a new console, you're going to want that technological upgrade. And I think folks should understand what they're getting into. The excitement of next gen has kind of worn off, because we've had these consoles for a little over a month now. And like that's fair, but it's just like, okay, my expectations are set and I'm not like blown away by anything, which kind of goes into the point about not having like full on next gen games, but
sure,
we'll get there. And, I still think it's a great console. I think it's still a great piece of hardware. It just, in contrast to PS5, like, excitement's a little worn off a little bit.
I was definitely looking at this as, okay, if I'm spending $500, what is this experience like that an Xbox One, or specifically I had a One X, would not give me? What am I getting here for $500? And quick resume, amazing quality of life feature. Of course, the load times is the number one thing that for me that was just undeniable. And it permeates literally everything. Like it's just no game isn't affected in, of course, obviously a beneficial way. Whether or not my opinion has changed over the last month, no. I gave the system an 8 out of 10, which we designate as great on the IGN scale. And I like Michael, I feel like it is a fantastic piece of hardware. I mean, it's got all the fundamentals down. It's got 12 teraflops of power. And I really do think it's a great piece of machinery. Now, that said, I have spent far more time, quite honestly, with the PlayStation 5 since both of them launched because of the games. But for the Series X, there was simply no major new first-party exclusives to play this fall. So that's the PS5 has been getting a little bit more of my attention over the last month.
So first of all, my audience is very different at Bloomberg than the IGN GameSpot audience, and we very much leave the hardcore benchmarking and graphical breakdown to you guys, and approach this from more of a businessy, more of a casual perspective. And from that, I think it's interesting to kind of, after spending so many years working for Kotaku and writing for the hardcore gamer audience, it's been interesting making that shift. And I think looking at it from someone's perspective who might not care about frame rate differences or whether they're getting 4K native or checkered, whatever. It's interesting to kind of be addressing them, because you can look at them and say, well, what are you interested in playing? And I think if the answer to that question is, well, I like missed out on a bunch of last generation's good games, you can say, hey, well, you better get your hands on Game Pass, because you can pay $10 a month and get like a ton of this stuff without having to pay for it. So that's really cool. And that is like the one big selling point for the Xbox. The other big selling point, and I wrote about this a little bit, is that like if you really want performance upgrades, and you're an Xbox gamer, your friends play an Xbox, you're hooked on Gears and Halo, and you don't have a PC, this is the place to go. But otherwise, the conclusion I can only come to is wait. Like, there's not a lot of compelling reasons to have one of these things. And in fact, looking back at the months since review, I haven't even turned on my Xbox. I think that I was kind of hoping for Microsoft to come out with a more competitive machine than they did. And I wish they had gone out of the box in more ways. I wish they hadn't stuck to such a traditional approach to this. And I just wish they were doing better, but they're not. And my Xbox is not. It is I guess collecting dust. It is unplugged. It has been unplugged for a while, sadly.
The thing that I really wanted to start us off with here, one of the topics that I wanted to get into, is the idea that the Xbox Series X was marketed as the most powerful console ever. Ryan, in your review, you say Xbox Series X main selling point is that it has 12.1 teraflops of computational power on tap to play games with. It's not a perfect measurement of speed, but on paper, it's twice as powerful as the Xbox One X and 20% better than the PlayStation 5. However, in the weeks since the launch, Digital Foundry especially has been doing some work analyzing some of the new games across PlayStation 5, and it's not as one-sided as those specs would lead you to believe. Devil May Cry 5, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Dirt 5, a lot of different modes in different games are having issues running on Xbox versus running on PS5. I wanted to ask the panel here, what do you make of these performance issues and just how detrimental they might be to the Series X in this launch window? Ryan, can we start with you?
Sure. I'm actually glad you brought this up because just as we record this, just this week, I guess it would be Podcast Unlocked episode 473. I had John Linneman on as a guest panelist from Digital Foundry, and we talked about this, and I brought this up. And he, in short, I mean, they're working on a sort of bigger, more comprehensive piece, as Digital Foundry is so wonderful at. But he kind of basically said that the PlayStation 5's tools and APIs are so good that they kind of close some of that software gap through kind of just better tools and software efficiencies, which makes sense if you, as a feasible thing, if you think about it now. That could change over time. Like, for instance, you brought up Dirt 5. The developers of Dirt 5 Codemasters has already said we're working on an update to resolve this sort of discrepancy between the Series X and PS5 versions. So I think the takeaway is that we can't draw a verdict on the third-party situation yet, but it does seem like, to your point, Zach, it's probably not going to be, as far as what's perceivable to the user, to the player, it might not be quite as obvious a difference. And it might end up being more of a coin flip between, as far as the performance in the long run with these two consoles.
Yeah, Jason actually says essentially this in his review. Jason, in your review, you say the Xbox Series X is technically superior to the PlayStation 5, but you'd hardly know it when comparing the two side by side. My question, you've been in this industry for a very long time. You've covered several console launches. Just how detrimental to a console launch is this sort of not mixed messaging, but this kind of discrepancy in performance when it's been marketed one way and then it is not living up to those expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's as detrimental as, like, if you look at the last console launch in 2013. I don't think your average Walmart shopper who's looking for a new console this holiday is going to be like, well, the PS5 runs this at 60 frames a second, but the Xbox is 60 frames a second with variable 4K, and the frame pacing isn't as good, and blah, 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 blah. So I don't really think that's a significant difference. But that said, I think Microsoft put a pretty big gamble, and kind of sold themselves as being the most powerful console ever. And that was the bait, the console war bait among the fanboys for a very long time. Is like, we're gonna win this generation because we have the most superior console. We have the best GPU, and Microsoft has put a lot of time and resources into, like, the word teraflops. Even just the fact that we all know what that means now is Microsoft just turning that into marketing lingo, which is kind of nonsensical.
Xbox Series X will lead us into the future of console gaming.
To answer your original question, Zach, I don't think that it is going to be that significant. And I think that really hurts Microsoft, because I think Microsoft's whole plan was like, hey, we're the most powerful console ever. And I think for them to really have an advantage over the PlayStation 5, they would have to be getting these better performances out of third-party games. And they're just not right now. Maybe in 2 years, it'll be different. And I hope so. I hope things get more interesting. I think competition is a really good thing. So I kind of hope that that Microsoft like can get their shit together and like make the Xbox as big a success as the PlayStation. But right now that does not seem to be the case.
I think that one of the most impressive things about the last generation of Xbox was the Microsoft's willingness to or ability to pivot or sort of rethink the way that they were managing certain aspects of the Xbox One. And I think that ultimately helped the Xbox One be a little more successful at the end of its life cycle than it would have been out of the gate. And I think that these issues that we're talking about now are all things that can be solved with updates, with patches, things like that. So just something for the listeners out there to keep in mind as we're talking about some of these technical issues. The other major issue that I wanted to talk about with the Xbox One launch is an issue that has been with Microsoft for many, many years. This is probably the biggest topic of conversation when it comes to the Xbox, and that's a lack of first-party titles. Jason, out of the gate, you say it plain and simple in your review, the new Xbox arrives without a single exclusive. Every Xbox game set to release this year can be found elsewhere, whether it's on the new PlayStation or the old Xbox. The most anticipated game, Halo Infinite, is delayed to next year. So my question is, what does a lack of a first-party blockbuster at launch mean for the Xbox Series X? And ultimately, is a lower price point more important than first-party games?
I actually, before the Series X launched, I wrote a thing saying, Microsoft doesn't care if you buy an Xbox Series X. They really don't.
Spot on.
Because like Jason says, and like many of us in industry say, is like, that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to infect as many households with Xbox platform. Like, if you have a PC, maybe that's not the best word, but like if you boot up a PC, like, oh shit, you want to subscribe to Game Pass, it's already installed on Windows. It's hard to find an Xbox Series X because they're flying off the shelves already. So it's not affecting sales. It will affect how we look at the console and whether or not people continue to be interested in the platform. I said in my review too, like, buying a console is an investment in your gaming future, not necessarily what's out now. And I still feel that way, of course.
Yeah, it's astounding how much damage long-term damage Microsoft did to themselves with the lack of investment and the mismanagement of their first-party assets. I mean, the story of the Xbox One's launch failures is well told at this point. But really, I would argue the longer-term damage might actually be how poorly they've dealt with first-party. Every year, they're like the Chicago Cubs of first-party exclusives, the pre-2006 Chicago Cubs. Wait till next year, and Michael's right. It is coming. Like, it is finally going to happen between all these studios that they've acquired, all the projects that they've announced. Awesome-looking things like Avowed and the return of Fable from Playground, and the Bethesda stuff. I mean, that's a king-making kind of move in terms of solving your first-party problem in a very permanent way. But yeah, like, the reality is, Peter Moore used to say, I think it was the Peter Moore quote, was first to 10 million wins. And by the time Microsoft gets the first-party games really flowing, and by all accounts, there could be some really great first-party games coming. Like, I hope Halo turns out great. I trust Forza is going to be good. I hope the return of Fable's excellent. Avowed looks great, and everything Bethesda's going to do. The Xbox does have good stuff coming, and it is a great box, but it's like, they're just, if you're standing in the store, which one do I buy? They're the same price. You look at the exclusive games lineup, and it's Microsoft. I mean, Game Pass is really the reason you would choose Xbox, and it is a compelling reason. But if at some point they do get great first-party games, then maybe the needle can slowly start to move, because you'd say, well, gosh, for $10 a month, I can get all these games, and now they've got great first-party games. But until then, it's it's just, yeah, it's very frustrating to be an Xbox fan.
Before we get to the lightning round, which is my favorite part of the show, I just want to talk a little bit about what we love about this system. I know it's there. I know you guys have these things that you're really into with the Xbox Series X. So take a little time. Tell me what you love about the Series X. Ryan, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when it comes back to like when I was very hard on Halo 5 and specifically its campaign when it came out in 2015 because I'm a longtime Halo fan and I love the series and I want it to do well and I want it to be a thing that I just love playing, and that campaign wasn't. And it's a little bit of a similar thing with the Series X. Like, this is a great machine. There is so much wonderful potential in it. As I said, it is like, I think it's a beautiful design. It is the quietest modern console I've ever heard. I mean, it's dead silent. It's cool in the temperature sense and in the just cool sense. I mean, they really did. I think they did a phenomenal job on the machine. And again, the quick resume, I think it's going to be there, and that's an excellent quality of life feature. The loading times are the most next-gen thing about it so far. Mm-hmm. All the groundwork is there. Microsoft has laid this incredible foundation, which they've been working on for years, and it's just, as Xbox owners, Xbox fans, we're just waiting for them to finally put up the glorious new house of all those exclusive, excellent new games. And by the end of this generation, I mean, the PS5 as well, but the Series X, I think we're going to look back on this as a great run with this machine.
Do you think that's how they do it? Do you think Satya just goes to the bank, writes a check, 7.5 a whole bunch of zeros, and then
got to get an extra wide, extra long check to fit?
That's right. It's like this.
Yeah,
and
like
the three comma
like
club check.
Yeah.
Jason, what do you love about the Series X?
I love all the little holes on top of it. I love how you can like put your finger on them. It's pretty fun to play with. My little daughter, my baby daughter likes to touch them. She enjoys the sensory feeling. No, what I really like about the Xbox and about Microsoft's approach is that, unlike their biggest competitor, they have cared deeply about backwards compatibility and preserving old games. And I think that's so important, not just as a fan of retro games, but also as just like a fan of the industry remembering its own history and preserving its history. And game preservation is such an issue in this industry, like the problem of not being able to play so many old games, publishers and license holders just not caring to preserve or make those games playable, or when they do, like as with Square Enix, sometimes reviving them in just like these god-awful like half-assed forms. So to see Microsoft come out and say, hey, we have this entire team dedicated to backwards compatibility, we're going to make every single, or just about every single Xbox 360, Xbox One, and now new Xbox Series X games all playable on this thing. You can get a lot of them on Game Pass, otherwise you can just download a bunch of them. And some of them even run better, like surprise, like this is faster or it has a better frame rate. Most of the old Xbox 360 games I played do not run at 60 frames a second, but still, I mean, even the fact that they're playable and they load up faster is just remarkable to me and just so impressive.
So I'm going to use this time to talk about a little game called Yakuza Like a Dragon. Let me tell you about my boy Kasuga Ichiban. Best boy that we've ever seen in video games. I'm going to say it right now. He probably might be my favorite character in all of games. But seriously, is like, I think Yakuza is an example of Microsoft reaching out to Japanese developers. And I love Japanese games. As folks might know, my favorite games series of all time are Yakuza, Final Fantasy, specifically Final Fantasy 14, and Persona and SMT, things like that kind of showcase that Microsoft is serious about expanding their horizons. That's one thing that I really like about Xbox. I think that not just that Yakuza is one of my favorite game of the year, but it's also indicative of how Microsoft is thinking about, supporting developers and putting their games on their platform. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Gentlemen, we've basically exhausted our topics for today, which means that we're going to get right into the lightning round. This is a rapid fire round where I'm going to ask you guys questions. You guys come right off the dome. Let me know what you got for an answer. So here we go. Michael, starting with you. I know that you love Yakuza. So what's the second best game on the Series X right now?
Second best game on the Series X. Near Automata. Straight up. Like if y'all haven't played that game, ooh, boy, you prepare to cry.
Michael Hyam remains on brand in the lightning round. Jason,
Oh, yeah.
you reviewed the PS5 and Series X for Bloomberg. If you could tell somebody if they can only buy one console, where does your money go? What vote do you give?
Oh, this is a little too easy. Right now, PlayStation 5 is the big winner. Might change in a couple of years, depending on what Xbox does, depending if you can only get Elder Scrolls 6 on the Xbox. But right now, PlayStation 5 by far.
PlayStation 5. Ryan, what game will actually make the Series X a must-buy?
I hope it's Halo, because if it's not, then we could do a whole show on this, and we do on the podcast Unlocked. But if this Halo isn't, like, I'm not saying it'll be bad, but if it's disappointing even in the way that Halo 5 kind of was, then Halo's days as like
The
system
franchise.
topping, killer app kind of series might be over. There's a lot riding on Halo, so God, I hope it's Halo.
Michael, in your review, you call the Series X aesthetic simple and clean. Is that a Kingdom Hearts reference?
Oh, yes.
How am I going to face everyone? Like this?
Ryan, who had a better launch this year, PS5 or Xbox Series X?
PS5.
Fair enough. Michael, how many AA batteries have you burned through since the Xbox Series X launch?
Ooh. 4 pairs, so 8 in total.
Oof, that's a lot of batteries.
A lot of Yakuza.
Jason,
Yeah.
you're living the dad. Jason, you're living the dad life now. Socks and sandals, etc. What's
Love
the
it.
quintessential dad game on Series X?
Oh man, the quintessential. I was about to say God of War, but no. I was about to say The Last of Us, but no. Oh my God, Sony has all the dad games. Microsoft needs to come out with some mom games to make up for this. And I would love, unironically, I would love to see some mom games. Does Madden count? Because I feel like it's just like a dad like cracking open a beer and playing Madden. And I was doing that a little bit. I was playing Madden 21 to see what it's like. Runs nicely, 60 frames a second. And I like to imagine that in my future suburban dad life, I'm moving to the suburbs shortly, I will be wearing socks and sandals, grilling, playing Madden, drinking a beer. I'm very excited for all this to happen.
It's a lot of activities at once, and kudos to you if you can balance
Yeah,
them.
it's called it's called quick resume, multitasking.
We are out of time. This is the end of our show, but before we go, I wanted to give each of y'all a moment to plug your stuff. Let us know where we can find you. If you're working on something that's really exciting, let us know what that is. If there's a game that you want to talk about that you haven't yet, Michael, I'm looking at you. You're probably going to plug Yakuza again. Talk to us about a game that we might not have heard of yet. Jason, let's start with you.
Yeah, you can find me on Bloomberg, where I write most of my things. You can also find me on the Triple Click podcast, which is pretty fun. I wrote a new book, but I'll talk about that down the road. It's not out for a while, but it's called Press Reset. Comes out in May, but you got some time. But if you want to pre-order it and throw me a bone, please do. I love pre-orders. Pre-orders help out. They help us authors. They help us master the algorithms that Amazon uses to run our lives. So if you want to go pre-order, it's called Press Reset. You can get it anywhere you'd like.
You can find me and all my bulls at Michael P. Hyam on Twitter, or you can go to GameSpot.com, where you can peep my work and all of my colleagues' work, because we, like IGN, we all put in a ton of work and do our best to deliver the news, reviews, previews, all that good stuff on video games. A couple things I got lined up. I do have on brand. I have a Yakuza localization interview coming up, so that should be out there. Folks are doing their Game of the Year stuff, so are we. And man, Final Fantasy 14 content is rolling out, so you can count on me at GameSpot to be covering Final Fantasy 14 continually if y'all are into that thing. And if you're not, you should be getting into it. So yeah, that's what I'm about. That's what we're about over at GameSpot.
I just started Stormblood, so looking forward to getting to the good stuff.
Mr. McCaffrey, where can people find you?
I'm gonna let you finish, but I want to first say that I respect the hell out of these two guys. Michael, the energy he's brought to GameSpot is just fantastic, and Jason, his work is I just respect the heck out of, just doing the investigative work that we just don't have enough of in this industry. I love what both of these guys are adding to games media.
Thanks, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Thank
I'm thrilled to do this with you guys. Thank you, Zach, because it's like I've never actually spoken directly to these two gentlemen like this before. So this was really fun for me. I'm on Twitter at DMC_Ryan. I'm sure I made some Xbox fans mad with something I said during the last hour. But I do love Xbox, and I do a weekly podcast about it called Podcast Unlocked. You can find that on youtube.com/IGN Unlocked or any of your favorite podcast services. And hey, I also do a monthly interview series, mostly monthly. The pandemic has kind of thrown a wrench in that, but it's called IGN Unfiltered, and it is sort of an hour-long plus sit-down with some of the coolest game developers in the industry about their lives and how they came to be who they are and do what they do.
Thanks to my guests Ryan, Jason, and Michael for joining me to talk about the Xbox Series X, and thank you at home for watching. Each week, we're bringing you a fresh cast from around the gaming world to talk about the biggest reviews. But this is a brand new show, and we want to hear your feedback. If you've got questions or improvements you'd like to see, or recommendations for future guests, drop them in the comments section on this video or shoot us an email at reviewcrew@ign.com. Don't forget you can catch our full, uncut chat in the audio podcast version of The Review Crew on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast services. We'll be back next Monday to talk about Game of the Year with special mystery guests. If you like this episode, be sure to let us know what games you'd like to see us talk about in the future, and check out our previous episodes on Sony's PlayStation 5 and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and keep it locked to IGN.